Hey everyone, what I wanted to talk to you guys about this week is what's a good lens to use for your application. Now, the application I'm going to talk about specifically are what I do at Fort Ticonderoga, which is event photography. Now, I like a shallow depth of field because I like to have a good bokeh. For example, if somebody was lighting off a cannon, I would love to have their hand and the light in focus, and the rest of it kind of just fading away. And for that, I might want to use something like a 2.8. Well, let's talk about F for a minute. So your F is basically how open the shutter is going to be. And the reason you see that lower Fs are much more expensive than higher Fs is simply because that's more glass. All right. It's your focal length over whatever the number is. So a number over 5 is a much smaller piece of glass than a number over 2.8, for example. So let's take the thought that I'm taking a photograph of a cannon. All right. The advantage I've got there is it's not moving. Right. I've got a hand moving in. It's not moving. It's in a fixed position. I'm not following action on a field. So if I'm taking it at a 2.8, and I'll include a depth of field calculator in the links for this episode notes. At 2.8, at 200 millimeters. Now, I'm figuring I'm about 50 feet away. Why? Because they have a safety zone around the cannon. They don't want anybody too close to it when it goes off who's not a member of the team. Okay? A depth of field at a 2.8 is going to be 3 feet. Now, what you're going to see in the results of a depth of field calculation is a far limit and a near limit. So what that means at 2.8, if I'm focusing out and I'm 50 feet away from where the target is, everything from 48.54 feet to 51.56 feet is going to be in focus, which is that 3-foot depth of field, okay? So that means everything a little before where I'm focusing and a little after where I'm focusing is going to be in focus. Now, the problem with that is if you've got a fixed thing, for example, if you're shooting a football game and you're focusing in on the guy who's going to receive it, you can track him. Right? That's pretty straightforward. You may not want the entire field. So at a 2.8, you can really get a close-up of him and have a lot of bokeh around him. A baseball game, somebody swinging a bat, they're in a fixed position. It's easy to just focus in on that. But when you're doing something that's basically a lot of run and gun, so when I'm at the fort, there are different types of events that go on at different times of the year, but sometimes during the same day that I'm there. For example, the last time I was up there, they had a battle running. So they had their normal musket demonstration. Right? Again, something I can't get too close to, so I need to have I just picked up a 100 to 400, 5.6 to 8. As a general purpose, because I can get in really close on them while they're doing that, but they're in a fixed position. So I could get away with a 2.8 for a cannon demonstration. I could get away with a 2.8 on a muzzle musket demonstration. So when they're using the muzzle loaders, I can zoom in close when they're loading them, etc. But again, we've got that barrier to protect us from what's going on. But if I'm shooting a battle going on, there's a couple of things that I don't care about. One is a 3-foot depth of field is probably a little too close for most of it. If I'm trying to capture the battle itself, I want you to feel like you're in the battle. So I would like to have some bokeh, but I don't want the bokeh to be so much in your face that you lose the battle. There was a Snyder film that came out recently with zombies. I won't go into any further than that. Used a lot of bokeh that was very distracting from the image going on. So, thinking the same thing here, if I have a 100 to 400 and it goes from 5.6 to 8, what that means is it's going to change between the low end and the high end. So at the 100, it's going to be at 5.6. At the 400, it's going to be at 8. Now, the depth of field calculator I've included only goes 5, 6, and 8, so we're going to use the 8 on that. With that, if I have it set at 8, bearing in mind that these are the minimums that you can use. If you get a lens that's a 2.8 or a 5.6 to 8, that's the lower end of what you can get. You can obviously open that up, or should I say narrow that down to a much higher F number. You can go up to F11 if you wanted to and really get a big depth of field, but just sticking to the low ends. I've now changed my depth of field from 3 feet to 8.5. Now my focus goes from 46 feet to just about 55 feet. So that gives a huge amount of area that's in focus. Now I may have to open that up even more depending on the distance between the people in the battle. But knowing that everything after that 54 feet is going to be bokeh is going to be sufficient for this use. What I want is I want clarity. And yes, a 2.8, I could do the exact same thing with a 2.8. But a 2.8 is a much, much more expensive lens. I believe it's going for $2,500 right now for the RF series. Versus what I picked up, which is about $800. Okay. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're getting into photography especially is how much are you going to spend right now. For me, that 100 to 400 is going to be a great lens when I go out and do landscapes because I don't really care about the bokeh so much on the landscapes. I'm probably going to have that F cranked way up. I'm going to be shooting from great distances to get trees and things like that. I don't really care as much. With that, it's a nice general purpose lens, and that's the main reason I got it for. The other is I would love to have a 70 to 200, 2.8, which again is like $2,500. I can't do that right now, but I've already got my 24 to 70 2.8. So that gets me into the 2.8s for when I'm doing portrait work. All right, 24 to 70 is a good size for doing portraits. When I have a group out there performing there with the fife and drum, for example, or doing drills, I can go wide angle if I need to. I can zoom in on them. It gives me a good amount of range for that. But when I'm shooting these battles, which are less frequent, the 100-400 is going to be sufficient for those purposes. But again, look at your depth of field, look at what you're going to be shooting, look at where you're going to be shooting from, because that all matters. And then from there, figure out which lens is going to get the job done for you and which lens you'd like to get in the future. So for me, the 100 to 400 is going to be great for right now, but you'll notice it leaves me a gap in my range, right? I've got a 24 to 70. Now I've got 100 to a 400. I'd like to put something in the gap in between, which eventually I will. And it'll probably be that 70 to 200, 2.8 that they've got. But for the meantime, this gives me what I need to get the job done. And that's what's important. When you're getting the photographs, make sure you've got a lens that's going to do the best job for you and your client without breaking the bank. And that's what I got for you guys this week. And I'll talk to you all next week.